Hey guys, and welcome back to the FFP. My name is Christian, and today we'll be covering some quick Week 16 injury update information. As I always say, this is a great opportunity to leave a question if you still have one. I do have a lot of questions to go back and answer from our start sit video, so that's what I'll be doing between now and the start of the Saturday games, in case you guys were wondering. Hopefully I'll get around to answering them all. I made the unfortunate mistake of pushing them off because I was simply lazy and had a kind of a busy week. But anyways, again, it's going to be a very quick video. There's not a whole lot to talk about this week. Something that we really find later into the season is that questionable players on winning teams, they will play. If you got a shot to make the playoffs, yeah, you are going to work your butt off and you're going to be out on that field helping your team win and get into the playoffs. And if your team's out of it, right, like if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and you're questionable, you have no motivation to play. They're almost certainly not playing. So everything seems pretty straightforward at this point. And it also feels like there's a little bit less injuries than in the past, although maybe that's because of how many players have been on the IR this year that we simply don't talk about most weeks. But anyways, I will not waste too much more of your time. We'll get into it. But first, I just want to ask you guys a quick question. As you can see, did a little updating of the graphics on these videos and the backgrounds. Let me know if you guys appreciate it. I think it looks pretty sweet, but it's up to you guys as to what you guys want. So I want to hear from you and what you appreciate as we continue to kind of upgrade our product and our production quality for you guys. But let's get into the quarterbacks and start talking about them. All right, guys, so as far as I know, there's really not a whole lot to talk about as far as injuries. Really, the only guy that I found that I felt like was worth really mentioning was Jameis Winston. He is struggling with a thumb and a knee injury and is currently questionable this week, Week 16, I believe, against the Texans. That's also, I believe, a Saturday game, so you'll have to make your decision on whether or not to play him ahead of time. We don't know too much right now, but he was upgraded to a full participant in Thursday's practice, so of course that's very good news, and he is expected to play. And yes, it is a Saturday game at 1 o'clock. I took notes on it, but totally forgot to read it. Anyways, he's expected to play. I expect him to play. One of the reasons for this, and I mentioned it a minute ago, we talk about playoff teams, non-playoff teams. The Buccaneers are not a playoff team, so why is Jameis Winston going to play through this injury? One, doesn't seem like a major injury at all. He really seems fine, and it was one of those, just kind of one of those dingers that'll bother you on a Monday, and by a Wednesday you're fine. The other thing being that we've all seen it. His turnovers, his fumbles, his interceptions, his mistakes, his errors. This guy is playing for his career. He needs to go out there and have a good game to give some coaches and some teams some more confidence in him. I mean, if he finishes the season strong, hey, I tell you what, I bet you the Buccaneers sign him and the Buccaneers want him to be their quarterback for at least another year or two. If he finished these last few games with another 6-7 interceptions or turnovers or whatever, yeah, you can bet that a lot of teams have a lot more apprehension. So there's a lot of financial and career success on the line for him. He'll be playing this week. As far as the other quarterbacks, that's pretty much it. Really not much else to talk about. Guys who were on the injury report last week, like Tom Brady, he's been removed, and guys like that. But what we have is Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton, Joe Flacco, and Jeff Driscoll. They are all on the IR, and that really seems to be all you need to know. Again, last week we had Lamar Jackson with a little bit of a quad strain. He played through it and looked phenomenal. And he's fine now. It's not even something that they've talked about or they've mentioned in the Ravens. So yeah, he should definitely be 100%. And I don't have any concerns about him. Sort of unfortunate, disappointing video because there's not a lot to talk about, but it is nice. In the fantasy championship, you hate to lose because your players are injured. Anyways, though, let's move on to the running backs now, guys. The first guy we got to talk about is Dalvin Cook. He's got that shoulder injury, and Alexander Mattison with the ankle injury. Now, heading into this week, out of last game, I was actually very much expecting Dalvin Cook to play in this game versus the Packers. I'll talk about why it seems like he may not in a second. It's funny, they came out at the beginning of the week, the Minnesota Vikings did, and Dalvin Cook talked about how he's fine, how he's healthy, it's going to be okay. Mike Zimmer said, very similar things where the whole trend that we were looking at was that he was going to be fine and he was going to play. But we found out that both Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook, they remain sidelined at Friday's practice. So that's getting pretty late into the week. Now, they do play a Monday game, so that does give him some extra time. And he is Dalvin Cook. If Dalvin Cook starts, if Dalvin Cook is in the game, play him. You got to put him in your fantasy lineup. But yeah, I'm definitely starting to have some questions as he is slightly trending in the wrong direction. And of course, if both of those guys are out, Boone will be the guy in the backfield along with Amir Abdullah, though Abdullah has a much smaller role than Boone. But all in all, it's kind of surprising to see this. He must really be banged up. We do know he has a career of injuries, not just in the NFL, but even going back to getting injured in college. He's one of those running backs that just can't stay healthy. Dalvin Cook is. And so that stinks. Heading into this game versus the Packers, though, I really thought, if he's even, 80%, they're not even going to put him. They're just going to be like, yep, he's fine no matter what and whatever. But yeah, so it is concerning. There is actually a pretty solid chance he doesn't play, though I wouldn't be horribly surprised if he did. Again, this is a big game versus the Packers, and winning this game means quite a bit for the Vikings. Josh Jacobs, he's got that shoulder injury. John Gruden ruled him out for this week. I don't have much else to say on that. He's been on and off banged up for many weeks now, struggling with that shoulder injury. And as the Raiders, who I believe are out of playoffs, I don't think they're in contention right now. There's really no sense in injuring and hurting the career of your young stud running back who has been a huge part of that offense. I mean, just a huge part. Of course, his replacement, DeAndre Washington, is the guy over Richard or whatever. DeAndre Washington ran the ball for 2 touchdowns, I believe over 5 yards per carry last game that he started in for Josh Jacobs. So he's a great replacement to make this week. It is, however, unfortunate that Josh Jacobs would be out against the Chargers. Carlos Hyde is questionable this week versus the Buccaneers. Again, that's a Saturday game. He's got an ankle injury. What we do know is that he seems ready to go. He was limited in practices, but that didn't seem like he had to be limited, more like the coaches, of course, being smart, resting him, and letting him get healthy. I do, as always, lean towards saying probably don't start him. He doesn't have massive value, though he is coming off of his, I believe, third 100-plus yard rushing game of the season. What we do right now, what I'm saying right now is interesting about this situation is he's got that ankle injury, and at first a lot of that seemed to be what was holding him out of practice, or what was kind of keeping him as limited and held back. But in the injury reports that the Texans put out, he was listed as not injury related earlier in the week. That changed later in the week, but there's a lot of mystery surrounding him right now. What was going on earlier in the week, as why is he, maybe it was just like a family thing where he's like, I got to go take care of this, and so I got to be limited at practice because my wife's got a surgery or whatever. But we do know he has that ankle injury. And again, the Bucs, they allow the third fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs the last I checked. So if you got a guy who's a less than 100%, who's already not super productive in a tough matchup, all in all, if you were planning to lean on Carlos Hyde, you should probably look towards some other options, and hopefully you can find someone. Jordan Howard, he's got his shoulder thing going on that he has struggled with for many weeks now, so I'm really not surprised, and I don't think you should be surprised either to see that he is questionable this week versus the Cowboys. It's been, I don't know how many weeks, 3 or 4 weeks or whatever since he's played. In fact, the really concerning thing, and he is still yet to be cleared for contact this entire week. He hasn't been cleared for contact in a very long time. He was, quote unquote, limited in practice, so he was running some drills, but he was not allowed to be hit. And, if we're sitting here on Friday and he still hasn't done contact, there's almost no way that he'll be playing this week. So you can pretty much consider him out for sure. Bo Scarborough, he's got that rib injury and is questionable this week versus the Broncos. Comes in as a very similar situation as Carlos Hyde, where he hasn't been massively productive, and then you add in the fact that he's probably going to be less than 100%. Rib injuries don't heal overnight, and then you throw in a fairly solid and recently improving Broncos defense. They're pretty physical, especially against the run, and so all in all, I would avoid him this week. Again, he's not a guy he's had fair volume. He's a guy who, if he plays, he is the back and he's going to get you about 20 touches, but he's not great in the passing game. He's really touchdown dependent. Anyways, that's my wrap up on Bo Scarborough. I should stay away from the start sit information there and just stick to the injury. Finally, as I kind of did with the quarterbacks, players who are on the IR, reminders for the running backs are Rashad Penny, Darrell Williams, Darius Geis, Kalen Ballage, and Ito Smith, all on the IR. So remember those guys this week, as say like with the Ito Smith situation, Devontae Freeman, continues to get that boost as the guy because Smith is out and doesn't have to worry about even getting his touches cut into as much. Of course, Freeman was already the starting back, we know that, but Smith would take 5 to 10 touches a game, just enough to keep him fresh. With Smith out, you get even more volume from Freeman, though. That has been the case over the last few weeks, so don't expect any sudden boost in stats this week over previous weeks. But that is the running backs. Let's move on to the wide receivers. Let's start off with the obvious wide receivers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, both out this week. Evans is on the IR and Godwin has already been ruled out. You guys already knew that, but I guess it's always nice to start from a place of comfortability. We already knew that. Again, both of them struggling with hamstring issues. I have no expectations that they'll be playing this week whatsoever. So yeah, absolutely look somewhere else for wide receivers. Julian Edelman, he's also marked as questionable with both a knee and shoulder injury. While Edelman has been struggling with his shoulder injury seemingly all season long, and the shoulder is not a concern for me, the knee is more recent, and that is a little bit more concerning, so I would continue to monitor that. And again, as you look for reports, as you check your fantasy app and you're getting news about him, as I suggest you guys do, check it before the games start on Saturday and on Sunday and such. That's what you want to look for. I don't care so much about the news on his shoulder. It's the knee that I'm worried about, so that's what I would look for. However, he is expected to play this week, and it is a tough game versus the Bills. The Patriots could swing either way on this one, because you could either, as the Patriots, if you win that game, they could be very set. They'd be set very pretty right then to get a bye week, right? And to rest their players and to have extra time. And they're one of the teams in the NFL that needs a bye week, because I don't think they're one of the best teams in the playoffs right now. They've really struggled as of recently. But then on the other side, like I said, if they lose that game, they don't even win their division. They could be bumped down to a wild card spot, of course, forcing them to play in the first round. So yeah, there is a lot there as far as implications for the Patriots. You can bet Edelman will be playing this week. DJ Chark is questionable with an ankle injury. I have said over the past couple of weeks, expect him not to play, though it is unusual that Doug Marrone gave him this questionable injury tag and said that he fully expects Chark to play this week. I believe in Atlanta. It's a Sunday game. That's weird to me because they're not a playoff team. He is a stud young wide receiver. It seems a little bit foolish to play him, but I guess on the part of Doug Marrone, he really needs to finish this year strong, as I think some people's confidence in the Jaguars has begun to wane a bit this year. He did add, I expect him to play, and then he said, kind of assuming his ankle is fine. I'm still leaning towards him not playing this week, and I would look towards other options. Does look like it's going to be a bit of a game time decision, though, as far as what you need to do, and just continue to monitor that and be smart, as all good fantasy owners are. Heck, you're in the championship this week, or in the playoffs at least, so good for you. But and that really tends to be the trend with a lot of wide receivers this week. Another guy who is really a game time decision is Curtis Samuel and Christian Kirk. Curtis Samuel has a knee injury right now. And he popped up on Thursday as limited participant in practice, and it sounds like he didn't practice at all on Friday, and so looks like it's really going to be one of those down to the wire game time decision sort of things for Curtis Samuel. Though he doesn't hold massive value, I don't think he's anything more than a wide receiver 3, so I think this doesn't impact too many teams out there. Christian Kirk, again, same sort of situation. The Cardinals have been very mysterious and quiet about him this week, and as I begin to dig into it, I found next to nothing. What we do know is he is a game-time decision that is questionable, and it's something to do with his ankle. That's really all we know right now, and as you guys who watch the channel know me, I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to leave it at that. Robbie Anderson, he's got an illness. This is always a tough one, and he's questionable this week with, again, an illness. This came up a few weeks ago, or a week or two ago, with Le'Veon Bell, where it says illness, and I just have to tell you guys, unfortunately, I don't know anything. He could have a migraine, he could have some mental illness, he could have depression, he could have a stomach flu. We have no idea what it is, and so he could be fine and 100%. In 2 hours, or he could struggle with this for another week and he could miss a game. However, he's not a bad play this week. In fact, he has averaged 5.5 catches, 92.5 yards, and a half a touchdown on 8 targets over the last 4 weeks. So he's been very productive as of recently, and if he plays, he's definitely a guy that's very tempting to plug into your lineup. So I would monitor that. He does have pretty big upside, and this tends to be the trend of Robbie Anderson to finish the season pretty strong. Will Fuller, he's also questionable with a hamstring. We don't know much right now, despite this quote-unquote questionable designation, I guess that's the term. It sounds like Fuller is good to go this week against the Buccaneers, barring any setbacks or continued issues with that. Again, all reports are that he's going to play. It sounds like he's going to play. This is important. I mean, the Houston Texans could still lose that division, despite the fact that they currently hold the lead. If they lose their next 2 games, the Titans could win the division. So it is important to note that they are still playing for something. And then finally, Nelson Agholor, he is also questionable. He is listed as questionable over the past few weeks, and to be quite honest, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see on Saturday him pop up as out, right? I don't fully expect him to play this week. In fact, he isn't expected to suit up by many people. I'm not the only, NFL fantasy analyst who thinks that. For me, I don't expect him to play just the way that things have been going as a whole for him. Haven't heard any real positive news, which is of course nice to hear. And it is a knee thing. Knee things tend to linger. They tend to really kind of hang around. But I don't got too much anything interesting on Agholor to say, except that I expect him not to play this week. So I guess I'll quit repeating myself. Finally, Taylor Gabriel is out. Alshon Jeffrey, Calvin Ridley, Marvin Jones, Auden Tate, and Preston Williams are all on the IR. Sorry, I said that kind of fast. Let me slow down and do it again. Alshon Jeffrey, Calvin Ridley, Marvin Jones, Auden Tate, and Preston Williams all on the IR, at least as far as wide receivers that I felt like were worth mentioning. Just as a quick reminder, I wouldn't typically mention these guys because they're on the IR, especially guys like Williams who've been on the IR for a few weeks, but this is a pretty short video and I've got the time to do it, so why not, I guess. But that's the wide receivers, guys. Let's take some time now, move on finally to real quick talk about a couple of tight ends. All right, guys, so there's not a lot to talk about this week for the tight ends. The first one being Noah Fant, struggling with that shoulder injury. He is questionable this week versus, I believe, the Lions. He is tentatively expected to play. At least that's the reports. That's what's coming out right now. However, he may not play, and he very well may not play at 100%. And, of course, with the way that offense was last week and the way that things have been going, that, of course, makes me very nervous. And I tend to believe you've got better tight end options out there than a less than 100% risky play in Noah Fant in a struggling Broncos offense. So as a whole, I'd lean away from him and definitely look towards some other options. Jimmy Graham, he is questionable with a groin injury. Similar situation to Noah Fant. I think that he is a much safer fantasy start. And this is an important game versus the Minnesota Vikings. But the Minnesota Vikings are a good defense for one. And if you're anything less than 100%, I do expect him to struggle. I think he is certainly more playable this week than Noah Fant, but I don't love him, and you do have to monitor it. However, I believe I already mentioned it. I do expect him to play this week. Finally, guys on the IR on the tight end position are Evan Ingram, Eric Ebron, Delaney Walker, TJ Hawkinson, and Ryan Griffin. All those guys are off. And boom, there it is for the tight ends. Not a whole lot to talk about, nothing interesting there, but I guess it is what it is. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me here in this very short injury update video. As always, leave a comment. I will do my best to get around to answering it. Just wanted to thank you guys so much for your continued support this year. You guys have been phenomenal, and especially for our supporters on Patreon, we really appreciate all that you guys do for us, and you make this show possible. Hopefully, we really are doing a great job and offering you guys some great content and earning your support. As always, guys, you have a great day, and God bless.